Hi, I'm Niala Boodhoo, host of the Axios podcast, One Big Thing. And we are coming to you from Axios House on the lovely promenade of Davos, Switzerland, where the World Economic Forum annual meeting is taking place. We're going to be here with you every day until Thursday, talking to Axios top reporters and our leaders, including our co-founders, Jim Vandehei and Mike Allen, about what they're seeing. And if you're not here at Davos, don't worry. You can follow along with everything we're doing by following us on our socials and Axios.com. And of course, check out my podcast, One Big Thing, which will be Davos themed this week and maybe next week too. To start us off today, I'm joined by Axios' chief economic correspondent, Neil Irwin. Hey, Neil.
Hi, Niala.
Oh, I forgot. You have your own microphone. Okay. Neil, so can you start by just catching us up quick? This is the WEF, the World Economic Forum. Can you just start by giving us sort of the backdrop of what the global economic picture and outlook looks like here coming into this meeting?
Sure. We are here in January of 2024. This time a year ago, there were a lot of warning signs about the global economy. Inflation was high. Interest rates were rising worldwide. There were all kinds of disruptions that might have caused. In January 2024, things look a little better, right? We see inflation coming down around most of the world. We see steady global growth. We see a basically okay picture, except there's all these risks looming out there. We have war in Israel and Gaza. We have, continued war in Ukraine. We have, energy threats. We have all kinds of things just looming out there that could disrupt this basically solid picture for global growth in 2024. And I think what we're hearing a lot of this week in Davos is people trying to assess those risks and figure out where things go from here.
And we also have, I think, is it half of the world's population is going to be voting in an election this year? Are you hearing people talking about that as well?
Yeah, massive year for politics, for global politics, how this shakes out. Do we end up in 2025, a year from now, with elected governments that are congenial to kind of globalization and to a more intertwined world, or nationalism and kind of steeper fissures between nations? That's one of these big looming questions for 2025. And on that list of risks that I was alluding to in terms of what might go wrong with the outlook.
So we're here in Davos, which I think if people have heard about, they think it's sort of a gathering of CEOs. It's not just CEOs who are here.
Yeah, a lot of CEOs, to be clear, a lot of very fancy people in fancy suits and fancy cars. Also non-government organizations, international organizations, political leaders from around the world, some activist groups. So you definitely get a wider panoply of the world than just the CEO class. That said, this is an unusual place, this town in Switzerland that once a year becomes the center of a hotbed of activity among kind of the global elite. So the cliches exist for a reason, but it is a wider aperture than that.
Including protesters who I've learned you can spot 3 protesters if you see 15 Swiss police following them.
I've been to a lot of international organizations and meetings of global leaders, and I've rarely seen the kind of security presence we see here. The Swiss Army is
very big guns.
They're present. Not just the Swiss Army knives with the tweezers and the screwdrivers. They have the full arsenal.
So I was talking to someone at Axios House earlier today, and I said to him, is this kind of just BS, these kind of meetings? And he said, actually, no. One of the things that he found so interesting was that he felt like everything he heard at this meeting he saw in headlines later this year. Do you feel like that's an accurate representation of what happens here?
Let's put it this way. Is there a lot of hot air going on in this promenade and all these meeting rooms? There is. It's cold outside, though, so some hot air can escape without much issue. It's a little bit like, if you remember that movie, The Devil Wears Prada, where the secretary, the assistant, has her sweater and the color was based on some fashion magazine from 2 years earlier. It's a little bit like
Blue.
that. Ideas get seeded here that global elites are talking about. They end up in the media. They end up in conversations at the G20 and the G7 among global leaders and among CEOs and boards of directors. And before you know it, they become reality. Not always, not predictably so, but climate activism is one big example where that's something that was this group and the kind of people who gather here were early on and now is kind of part of our world. So you do see some of those where a conversation gets seeded here that you do see becoming part of the news cycle and part of the world later.
So that's part of why it matters. If you spend even 30 seconds outside of here, you'll see a ton of signs about AI. Is that the big theme this year?
I think it is. It's, this time a year ago, ChatGPT had kind of just really been rolled out and people were understanding how powerful these tools could be, but it was still very early. We're a year later. I think now these AI tools are being integrated more in actual business. It's less in the hype cycle, more in the reality cycle, but I think everybody's still trying to figure out what that means for individual industries, individual companies, and for workers the world, around the world. What jobs will become better and more lucrative and more productive? What jobs might be eliminated and no longer exist? How does that play out geopolitically? How does that play out in corporate strategy? Those are the big open questions that I think a lot of people are discussing in Davos this week.
So, Neil, we've talked about who's here, a little bit why it matters. What else are you going to be watching for this week?
I think the tone of these conversations and whether there's a sense that that the world is it's a confusing world. There's a lot going on all the time, but that we will get through this year without any kind of huge political disruptions. And, that includes geopolitical war and peace. From the U.S., the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken's coming, Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, leaders from other major countries. Is there some sense that that the kind of ship of state for all the major countries is on a steady course? And I think that's one of those things that's uncertain in this precarious world of the 2020s.
Axios' chief economic correspondent, Neil Irwin. You can follow his reporting this week and come back here. We will be here every day until Thursday. Thanks for watching.